My sister's baby trap and the secrets that followed. It all began when Megan, 30, called Sam, 33, and asked to meet him for lunch. She showed up visibly nervous, eyes darting around as she ordered water, tapping her fingers against the glass. "Sam," she said, barely above a whisper. "I'm pregnant." Sam's heart leaped with happiness for his younger sister. Megan, the free-spirited sibling who traveled the world and jumped from one job to the next, was finally settling down. At least he hoped. "That's amazing news, Megan. Are you happy?" Megan bit her lip and looked away, her fingers trembling. "Not exactly. I don't think I'm ready to raise a child, Sam. I know it sounds terrible, but I think you and Alex would be perfect parents for this baby." Sam was stunned. Adopting his sister's child wasn't something he'd considered. He and Alex had talked about starting a family someday, but the timing was uncertain. Yet he saw the desperation in Megan's eyes. She looked scared and lost, not the confident sister he knew. "Are you sure, Megan?" he asked cautiously. "I am. I've thought about it for weeks. I know this is a lot to ask, but I just can't be a mother right now," she said, her voice shaky but resolute. She reached out, grabbing his hand. "Please, Sam." After a long conversation with Alex, Sam agreed. The decision was overwhelming, yet they both felt a strange sense of destiny about it. They began the adoption process, arranging meetings with lawyers and doctors to ensure everything was legally sound. But as time went on, Sam noticed odd behavior from Megan. She was evasive, avoiding him for weeks at a time, and when they did meet, she seemed tense and distracted. She wasn't attending her doctor's appointments, and her explanations were vague. Suspicion gnawed at Sam, especially when Megan started pressing for money. First it was for doctor's bills, then rent, and eventually even for living expenses. But each time Sam asked to go with her to an appointment, she declined. The turning point came when Sam received a call from Megan's neighbor, who casually mentioned that Megan had been seen with a man several times. A man she'd introduced as her boyfriend. Feeling a chill run down his spine, Sam confronted Megan. "Are you hiding something, Megan? You've been avoiding doctor's visits, asking for money, and now I hear you're with some guy?" Megan's face went pale. She stammered, clearly taken off guard. "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is," Megan confessed. She'd rekindled a relationship with her high school boyfriend, Leo, after running into him at a bar months before. They'd spent time together, rekindling their old flame, but when Megan found out she was pregnant, Leo had vanished. Desperate and alone, she turned to Sam, realizing she wasn't ready to be a single mother. "You made it sound like you were alone in this. You didn't even mention Leo?" Sam said, feeling betrayed. "I didn't want to drag him into this mess, Sam. He's not reliable. I thought you and Alex would be better parents. I wanted a way out." Despite the betrayal, Sam and Alex agreed to continue with the adoption. But Megan's erratic behavior continued, causing constant tension and leaving Sam on edge. They began questioning if she was fully committed to the decision. Then one day, Sam received a message from Megan's old friend, Jess, who claimed she knew something shocking. She asked Sam to meet her in private. Jess revealed that Megan had a hidden agenda. She planned the pregnancy as a means to gain financial support, manipulating her family for months. And it wasn't the first time she'd lied about a pregnancy to control those around her. Shocked and heartbroken, Sam decided to confront Megan one last time. "What have you been doing, Megan?" "Jess told me everything. Did you ever intend for us to adopt this child, or was this all a twisted way to get money?" Megan broke down, sobbing. "I thought I could handle it, Sam. I thought I could be a mother, but I was scared. I just wanted to feel safe, and you and Alex have always been my safety net." Furious and hurt, Sam told Megan that he and Alex would no longer support her financially unless she came clean and made a decision, either to raise the child on her own or give them full custody, no strings attached. In the end, Megan chose to keep the baby, but Sam and Alex severed financial ties with her. Over time, Megan attempted to take on motherhood alone, struggling but eventually finding her footing. The family remained fractured, with lingering distrust and heartbreak. For Sam and Alex, the experience taught them about boundaries and the dangers of blind loyalty. They chose to move forward, pursuing adoption on their own terms, wiser for the ordeal. Lucas always knew that Nate was the favorite. While Lucas was responsible, studious, and driven, Nate was carefree, rebellious, and always in trouble. Yet, somehow, Nate's accomplishments, however minor, were celebrated with an intensity Lucas never received. By the time he was in high school, Lucas had accepted that no matter what he achieved, it would never be enough for his parents. They celebrated Nate's every success but brushed off Lucas's accomplishments, often with the excuse, "You're the responsible one, Lucas. We know you'll do great things." This was a lie Lucas told himself to cope. As the years went by, he distanced himself emotionally, focusing on building a life of his own. He went to college, graduated with honors, and began a successful career in finance. When he met Emma, it felt like his life was finally falling into place. She was kind, ambitious, and understood the complicated dynamics with his family without judgment. Their relationship deepened, and after 5 years together, Lucas proposed. Lucas decided to throw a small engagement party with close friends and family to celebrate. He wasn't expecting much from his family, but it was still a significant event in his life, and he wanted them to be there. Invitations went out, and Lucas was relieved to see most of his friends and extended family RSVPing yes. But 2 days after sending the invitations, Lucas received an unexpected phone call from his mother. "Lucas," she said in a tone dripping with frustration, "we need you to reschedule your engagement party." He was taken aback. "What? Why?" "We're hosting a graduation party for Nate that day. He finally finished his degree and we want to celebrate." Lucas felt a familiar frustration bubble up. Nate had dropped out of 3 different colleges over the years, burned through savings, and had even been arrested twice. His parents had bailed him out every time, insisting he just needed direction. "I sent out invitations weeks ago," Lucas replied, trying to stay calm. "I didn't know you were planning anything for Nate." "Well, we hadn't announced it yet, but it's important to your brother. We need you to understand that. He's had a difficult journey." Lucas clenched his jaw. This was typical. Nate's every struggle had always been celebrated, while Lucas's milestones were glossed over. "I'm not rescheduling," he said firmly. "This is my engagement. I've waited a long time for this." His mother's voice turned icy. "Lucas, don't be selfish. You know how much we've all had to support Nate. This is his moment." The conversation ended with Lucas feeling frustrated and heartbroken. He confided in Emma, who suggested he stand his ground. She had witnessed years of passive comments and backhanded compliments from his family, and she believed it was time for Lucas to prioritize himself. Over the next few days he started getting calls from his parents and even Nate, who accused him of trying to steal his spotlight. "Really, Lucas? After everything I've been through?" Nate sneered. "I thought you'd be happy for me." Lucas's patience wore thin. "I've supported you your whole life, Nate. This is my engagement. I'm not rescheduling for you." The calls continued, and Lucas learned from his cousin that his parents were encouraging the family to attend Nate's graduation party instead of his engagement celebration, painting Lucas as the selfish older brother trying to sabotage Nate's happiness. Hurt and betrayed, Lucas decided it was time to tell his side of the story. He wrote a message to his family explaining the years of favoritism, the neglect he'd felt, and how this engagement was the first time he was truly putting his happiness first. He invited everyone to choose whichever event they felt was more important to attend, but he made it clear that he wasn't going to tolerate the double standards anymore. On the day of the engagement party, something remarkable happened. Nearly everyone showed up. Friends, extended family, and even a few of his parents' close friends, all there to celebrate Lucas and Emma. For the first time in his life, Lucas felt validated, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about him. The party was a huge success, but the next morning his parents and Nate showed up at his door, demanding to speak with him. Lucas opened the door cautiously. His father, usually a calm man, was visibly angry. "You embarrassed us, Lucas," his father spat. "Everyone left Nate's party early to come here. Do you understand how humiliated we felt?" Lucas, tired of holding back, replied, "You embarrassed yourselves. I didn't force anyone to come here. They chose to." Nate scoffed, crossing his arms. "Of course you turned everyone against me. You've always hated me." "I don't hate you, Nate," Lucas said, exasperated. "I just wanted one thing in my life to be about me. You've always been the center of everything, and Mom and Dad have enabled you at every turn." His mother's voice cracked. "Lucas, we're a family. You're supposed to support each other." "Support goes both ways, Mom," Lucas replied. "For years, I've been treated like I'm invisible because I'm the responsible one. Nate has had more support than I could ever dream of. I've built my life on my own without asking for anything from you." His parents were silent, but Nate's face twisted with anger. "You're just jealous because I'm more important to them than you?" Lucas looked at him, a sad smile forming on his face. "You may be important to them, Nate, but that doesn't mean I have to keep putting myself second for you. I'm done." After a few more tense words, his parents and Nate left, slamming the door on their way out. Lucas felt a strange sense of relief as he watched them walk away, finally free of the burden he'd carried his entire life. Over the next few months he didn't hear from them, but he felt more at peace than ever. Friends, extended family, and even a few of his parents' old friends continued to stay in touch, offering their support and understanding. He and Emma moved forward with their wedding plans, and Lucas was overwhelmed by the love and support from those who truly cared. On the morning of his wedding he received a handwritten letter from his mother, apologizing for the years of neglect and asking if they could meet to mend things. While Lucas wasn't sure if he could ever fully forgive them, he appreciated the gesture. In the end, Lucas realized that family is not about blood but about mutual respect, love, and support. For the first time he felt proud of the life he'd built, a life on his terms surrounded by people who saw him for who he was, not as a shadow to his brother. Sister betrays sister. Growing up in a small, cozy suburban home, the narrator, 28F, and her younger sister Lizzie, 26F, shared an inseparable bond. Their parents, John, 55M, and Mary, 53F, were working class and dedicated, instilling strong family values in both girls. The sisters were raised with the notion that family is forever and that they should always look out for each other. The narrator, introverted and studious, was content with books and academics, while Lizzie, with her vibrant personality, was the creative, free-spirited artist who could bring laughter to any room. Although they were opposites in many ways, their late-night talks and shared dreams made them confidants. Their relationship took on a new layer when the narrator met Jake, 30M, in college. Jake was everything she had ever wanted: intelligent, kind-hearted, and down-to-earth. They bonded over their shared love of literature and spent countless hours discussing classic novels and philosophy. Jake and the narrator's connection was immediate, and within a few months he became her first serious boyfriend. By the time they graduated, they had moved into a small, cozy apartment together, and began discussing the future they wanted to build, including the possibility of marriage. Meanwhile, Lizzie's life was far less stable. After high school, she pursued art passionately, choosing not to attend college. While their parents were disappointed in her decision, they respected her determination, though Lizzie struggled financially. She worked odd jobs to support her art, but money was always tight. The narrator and Jake became her main support system, allowing her to stay with them frequently and helping her with art supplies or rent when needed. Lizzie's talent was undeniable, and both the narrator and Jake believed in her potential. They were happy to help her however they could. Jake and Lizzie hit it off from the beginning. He appreciated her love for indie music, her knowledge of the local art scene, and her bohemian spirit. The narrator saw their friendship as a blessing, thrilled that her boyfriend and sister got along so well. She didn't mind when Jake and Lizzie would go to art shows together, or when they stayed up late discussing art and music. In fact, she often encouraged Lizzie to lean on Jake, grateful that Lizzie had another person to rely on. After 5 years together, the narrator and Jake had weathered numerous ups and downs, including financial struggles and the loss of a beloved family pet. They shared countless memories and had even started looking at engagement rings, imagining a future filled with family and stability. In contrast, Lizzie's life remained uncertain. She moved from job to job, unable to find steady footing in her career or her relationships. Her art hadn't taken off as she'd hoped, and the pressures of adult life began to weigh on her. One rainy April day, everything came crashing down. The narrator had left some crucial files on her home laptop and texted Lizzie, who was staying over at the time, to send them to her at work. Lizzie agreed, and the narrator didn't give it another thought. Hours later, after finishing a presentation, she opened her email and discovered a thread of messages Lizzie had accidentally left open on her computer. The emails were intimate, filled with shared secrets, plans for secret meetings, and confessions of love between Lizzie and Jake. The narrator's heart dropped. It felt as if the floor had disappeared from beneath her. In that moment, her world was shattered. Unable to bear the thought of facing her co-workers, she left work early and headed home, numb and barely able to think straight. When she confronted Jake, he initially tried to dismiss it as harmless flirtation. But as she pressed him, he admitted to a full-blown affair with Lizzie that had been ongoing for 6 months. He said it started as innocent late-night conversations while she was asleep or working late, but it had grown into something deeper. Jake insisted he was confused about his feelings, and that he never intended to hurt her. But his words felt like empty excuses, making the betrayal all the more unbearable. Confronting Lizzie was even harder. She went to Lizzie's apartment, feeling a mix of anger, hurt, and disbelief. When Lizzie opened the door and saw her sister's face, her expression fell, revealing her guilt. Unlike Jake, Lizzie didn't try to deny anything. She confessed that she had fallen in love with Jake and claimed it was something she couldn't control. She said she never wanted to hurt her sister, but that her feelings were too strong to ignore. The narrator could barely listen, the pain was too intense. This wasn't just a boyfriend's betrayal, this was her own sister, the person she had trusted most in the world. For weeks, the narrator's life was a blur of pain and betrayal. She moved out of the apartment she shared with Jake and stayed with a friend while she tried to rebuild her life. Her parents, devastated by the rift, encouraged her to forgive Lizzie, saying everyone makes mistakes and that family should come first. They downplayed the betrayal, viewing it as a moment of weakness rather than a deep breach of trust. But the narrator couldn't find it in herself to forgive Lizzie or Jake, feeling that the betrayal had left scars too deep to heal. Months turned into years, and with the help of therapy and supportive friends, she started to reclaim her life. She poured herself into her career, found a new apartment, and began to rebuild her sense of self. Her relationship with her parents remained strained, as they continued to urge her to let go of the past, unable to understand the depth of her hurt. They couldn't comprehend that the betrayal had not only ended her relationship but also destroyed her sense of trust in her closest family ties. 2 years later, she met Alex, 32M, at a charity event for an animal shelter. He was warm, grounded, and refreshingly kind. When she cautiously opened up about her past, he listened without judgment, offering her understanding and patience. Slowly, she found herself falling in love again. Alex gave her the space to heal at her own pace, and eventually they became engaged. The prospect of marriage filled her with hope, and for the first time in years she felt like she was moving toward a future that was entirely her own. But as they planned their wedding, her parents brought up the issue of inviting Lizzie. They insisted that Lizzie, as her sister, should be there, and urged the narrator to put the past behind her. The narrator was torn. She wanted to focus on her future with Alex without reopening old wounds. Her parents argued that family is forever, and that she should forgive Lizzie, even if only to keep the peace within the family. They tried to guilt her, reminding her of their family values and pressuring her to be the bigger person. Despite the pressure, she ultimately chose to exclude Lizzie from the wedding, realizing that she deserved a day free from pain and past betrayals. Her decision to prioritize her peace over her family's expectations was met with anger and disappointment from her parents, who accused her of tearing the family apart. The tension reached a boiling point, but she remained steadfast, defending her right to protect her happiness. The narrator knew she couldn't heal if she kept compromising her boundaries to satisfy others. On her wedding day, she felt a bittersweet mix of emotions, joy, relief, and a lingering sadness for what had been lost. As she exchanged vows with Alex, she felt a profound sense of closure. Surrounded by friends and supportive family members who respected her decision, she realized that her strength to move forward was a victory in itself. This was her new beginning, and it marked the end of a chapter defined by betrayal and hurt. In the months after the wedding, her relationship with her parents continued to be strained. They still urged her to reconcile with Lizzie, seeing the broken family as something that could still be mended. But the narrator held firm, explaining that while she might one day find forgiveness in her heart, she could never return to the relationship she once had with Lizzie. The betrayal had irrevocably changed her, and she had learned that self-respect and boundaries were worth more than forcing a connection with someone who had deeply wounded her. Though painful, the experience taught her invaluable lessons about resilience, self-worth, and the importance of trusting herself. She realized that sometimes, the healthiest choice is to walk away, even if it means leaving behind those who once meant the most. Her marriage to Alex became a symbol of her strength and her journey toward a life filled with respect, trust, and authenticity. Free from the shadows of betrayal, she embraced her future with open arms, finally at peace with the choices she had made. Golden child conflict. Growing up in a close-knit but competitive family, the narrator, 28M, always felt overshadowed by his younger brother Leon, 26M. Their parents, Henry and Linda, were hardworking and traditional, firmly rooted in the belief that family was everything. But from an early age, the narrator noticed a difference in how he and Leon were treated. Leon, with his charisma and mischievous charm, was adored by their parents and seemed to get away with everything, while the narrator, though diligent and responsible, rarely received the same attention or praise. The favoritism became obvious in small but impactful ways. When the narrator brought home a trophy from a science fair in the 5th grade, his parents were happy but only mentioned it in passing. But when Leon won a ribbon in a school art competition 2 years later, they threw him a party, inviting friends and family to celebrate. As the years went on, these patterns became more deeply ingrained. For his 16th birthday, the narrator was gifted a modest, used car his father had fixed up. But for Leon's 16th, Their parents surprised him with a brand new car, complete with a bow on top and a family dinner to celebrate. Their parents' favoritism persisted even through major milestones. When the narrator graduated high school at the top of his class, his parents gave him a congratulatory handshake and a simple dinner at home. But when Leon barely scraped through his graduation years later, they organized an elaborate celebration with catering, decorations, and extended family members who traveled to attend. Every time the narrator achieved something, his success was noted but soon forgotten, while every minor accomplishment of Leon's became a cause for celebration. The narrator learned to keep his head down, focusing on his studies and personal goals without expecting recognition from his family. Over the years, this constant comparison took its toll on the narrator. He often felt invisible within his own family, as if his achievements mattered less simply because they came from him. When he left for college, he chose a school far from home, hoping that distance would allow him to build an identity separate from his family's expectations. He found solace in academics, working hard and eventually graduating with honors. While he sent his parents a message about his graduation ceremony, he didn't expect them to attend. Sure enough, they didn't come, claiming it was too far and promising to celebrate when he came home. But no celebration ever happened. College also brought Ina into his life. She was kind, compassionate, and fiercely independent, qualities that he deeply admired. The two grew close, bonding over shared values and dreams. For the first time, the narrator felt truly seen and appreciated for who he was, rather than what he could offer. Ina encouraged him to open up about his family dynamics, helping him see that he was not selfish for feeling hurt. Over the years, Ina became his closest confidant, and they built a life together, moving into a small apartment and supporting each other through the ups and downs of early adulthood. Although his family was aware of Ina, they showed little interest in her or the relationship, dismissing it as a young phase. Meanwhile, Leon's life took a rockier path. Known for his charm but also his impulsiveness, Leon often found himself in trouble, both in school and outside of it. He barely graduated high school and spent the next few years hopping from one idea to the next, from a failed t-shirt business to attempting YouTube, each ending in disappointment. While their parents invested time, money, and energy into supporting Leon's ventures, the narrator watched from afar, feeling a mix of resentment and sadness. No matter how many times Leon failed, their parents were there, ready to pick up the pieces and encourage him to try again. Years passed, and while the narrator continued to build a successful career, Leon eventually decided to attend a local community college. It took him years to complete his associate's degree, failing multiple courses and taking several breaks along the way. But when he finally graduated, their parents acted as though he had just earned a doctorate. They spoke with pride to relatives, boasting about Leon's perseverance and tenacity. It was in stark contrast to the quiet congratulations they had given the narrator years earlier. By this point, the narrator had proposed to Ina, his partner of 10 years. Their relationship had grown into something beautiful and solid, and he was excited to celebrate their engagement with loved ones. He and Ina organized a modest yet meaningful engagement party, inviting friends, colleagues, and family members. For the first time, he felt hopeful that his family would show up to celebrate an important moment in his life. They had never made much of his achievements, but perhaps he thought this engagement party could be different. After all, it was a major life milestone and he wanted his family to be there. But just days after sending out invitations, he received a call from his parents. They demanded he cancel his engagement party because they had decided to throw Leon a graduation celebration on the same day. Despite having had ample time to schedule it on a different day, they insisted it had to be then. His mother's tone was firm, almost dismissive as she explained that this was Leon's big moment and that family should prioritize him. Shocked, the narrator explained that he had already sent out invitations, booked a venue, and arranged for food. Changing the date at this point would be difficult and unfair to his guests. His parents, however, were unmoved. They accused him of being selfish, saying he should support Leon instead of competing for attention. For years, the narrator had tried to be patient, excusing his family's favoritism in the hopes that things would change. But this felt like a breaking point. He had finally achieved something he wanted to celebrate, and once again they were asking him to step aside for Leon. He tried to reason with them, suggesting they celebrate Leon's graduation on another weekend. He pointed out that Leon's graduation wasn't even from a university but a local community college, while this engagement marked a new chapter in his life. But his parents refused, saying that Leon needed this support and that his brother had worked hard to get to this point. They painted the narrator as selfish, framing his desire to celebrate his engagement as an attack on his brother's success. After a tense phone call, he hung up, feeling deeply hurt. In his mind, this was just another example of how his family had always chosen Leon over him, how they had always minimized his achievements in favor of his brother's smaller milestones. As he relayed the conversation to Ina, he felt a growing sense of anger. For too long he had accepted their treatment, thinking it was his duty as the older sibling to support Leon, to put his own needs aside for the greater good of the family. But this time was different. This was his life, his engagement, his happiness on the line. Over the next few days, he heard from extended family members who had been contacted by his parents. They told him that his parents were actively encouraging people to attend Leon's party instead, painting the narrator as jealous and inconsiderate. Deeply hurt, he called each relative individually to explain the situation, revealing how he had been sidelined for years and how this engagement was a rare moment he had hoped to share with loved ones. To his surprise, many family members sympathized with him, seeing through his parents' manipulation and expressing regret over how he had been treated. Several assured him they would attend his engagement party, choosing to support him for the first time. When the day of the engagement party arrived, nearly everyone invited showed up. Friends, colleagues, and many relatives gathered to celebrate the narrator and Ina, filling the room with warmth, laughter, and support. The narrator felt a mix of joy and relief, grateful that people had chosen to be there for him, validating his experiences and recognizing his worth. For the first time he felt seen, celebrated, and appreciated. Surrounded by those who genuinely cared, he found a sense of belonging that had always felt out of reach within his family. But the happiness of the day was soon overshadowed by an unexpected confrontation. The next morning his parents and Leon arrived at his home, furious that so few people had attended Leon's party. They accused him of sabotaging his brother's celebration, calling him selfish and immature. His father accused him of trying to split the family, while his mother berated him for stealing the spotlight. Leon joined in, calling him jealous and accusing him of always trying to outshine him. Their words cut deep, stirring up old wounds that had never fully healed. For years, the narrator had bottled up his resentment, swallowing his hurt to keep the peace. But as his family continued to belittle him, something snapped. He reminded them of all the times he had been overlooked, all the celebrations he never had, all the moments they had dismissed his accomplishments as if they meant nothing. He told them how hurtful it was to be treated as an afterthought in his own family, to constantly watch his achievements minimized while Leon was celebrated for even the smallest things. His parents, however, were unmoved. They accused him of being dramatic, dismissing his feelings as petty grievances. Ina, who had been listening quietly, finally stepped in. She reminded his family that this was his engagement, one of the most important moments of his life, and that he had every right to celebrate it. She firmly asked them to leave, warning them that if they continued to disrespect him, they would not be welcome in their lives. Angry and indignant, his parents left, muttering about how they'd expected better from him. Leon slammed the door on his way out, leaving the narrator and Ina alone, feeling a strange mixture of relief and sadness. For years he had craved his family's love and acceptance, hoping that one day they would see his worth. But he realized now that their approval had come at too high a cost. He was done sacrificing his happiness for their validation. In the weeks that followed, he maintained his boundaries, ignoring his parents' attempts to guilt him into apologizing. They continued to paint him as the one who had caused the family rift, but for once he didn't let their words get to him. With Ina's support, he found the strength to prioritize his well-being, focusing on building a future with people who genuinely valued him. He reconnected with relatives who had attended the engagement party, strengthening bonds that had long been neglected. For the first time he felt free to live authentically, surrounded by those who saw him for who he was, not who they wanted him to be. Reflecting on his journey, the narrator came to understand that family isn't defined by blood alone, but by mutual respect, love, and support. He had lost his connection with his parents and Leon, but he had gained a sense of self-worth and the knowledge that he deserved to be treated with kindness. His engagement party became a turning point, marking the end of a lifetime of being overlooked and the beginning of a life where he could finally stand tall and proud, knowing that he was enough. In the end, he didn't need his family's approval to validate his happiness. He had found peace, acceptance, and a sense of belonging with those who genuinely cared for him. And as he looked forward to a future with Ina, he knew that he had finally broken free from the shadows of his family's expectations, ready to live a life that was truly his own. Ex-wife's unexpected return. The narrator, 37M, had always seen himself as a family man. Coming from a background where loyalty and commitment were values instilled from a young age, He believed in creating a home filled with love and stability. This conviction only strengthened when he met Angela, 36F, in their mid-20s. She was vibrant, driven, and full of life, and he was drawn to her immediately. They worked in the same firm, and over shared lunches and late-night conversations, a relationship blossomed. Within 2 years they were married, and he felt that he had found his life partner. The early years of marriage were blissful. They welcomed their first daughter, a beautiful little girl who became the center of their lives. However, the harmony in their relationship began to waver after Angela became pregnant with their second child. The pregnancy had been unplanned, and although he assured her that they could make it work, he noticed a change in her. Angela grew resentful and distant, her once joyful demeanor replaced by irritability and anger. While he initially attributed it to hormones and the stress of raising young children, her behavior only worsened after their second daughter was born. Angela had originally planned to be a stay-at-home mother, focusing on raising their children and managing the household. She had left her job shortly after their first child was born, a decision they made together. However, as the second pregnancy progressed, her involvement in the household began to wane. She complained of constant fatigue, insisting on hiring a housekeeper even though it strained their budget. He agreed, hoping it would alleviate her stress, but even with extra help, Angela rarely engaged with the children or managed the home. More often than not, she spent her days in front of the television, indifferent to the responsibilities around her. As the months went by, he found himself doing everything, working long hours, paying bills, taking care of the kids, and managing the household. He was exhausted but still tried to support Angela, encouraging her to seek therapy or counseling. She dismissed his suggestions, often lashing out at him and accusing him of not understanding her struggles. The children sensed the tension, and their once happy home felt cold and strained. Their eldest daughter grew cautious around her mother, carefully choosing her words to avoid triggering Angela's temper. The man's heart broke watching his family unravel, yet he held on to the hope that things would improve. After their second daughter was born, he tried to have a heart-to-heart conversation with Angela. He suggested they cut back on the housekeeper's hours and divide responsibilities more evenly, but Angela refused. She accused him of blaming her for their financial strain and lack of harmony in their home. The conversation escalated into a heated argument, with Angela accusing him of being a loser who couldn't provide adequately. In a moment of anger, he told her that her neglect was affecting their children and that their eldest was beginning to fear her. That comment sent Angela into a rage and she shoved him hard. He lost his balance, falling onto the coffee table and shattering the glass. Bleeding and shaken, he was rushed to the emergency room. The incident left a scar, not just physically but emotionally. Although Angela tearfully apologized, promising it would never happen again, something had changed. He could no longer trust her around their children, fearing that her anger might turn toward them. After careful thought, he asked her to move out temporarily, suggesting she stay with her parents while they worked through their issues in counseling. Angela resisted initially, but eventually agreed, and their separation began. Although painful, he felt it was necessary to protect his daughters from her volatility. They spent a year in marriage counseling trying to mend the cracks in their relationship. During this time, Angela was diagnosed with postpartum depression, a revelation that gave him a glimmer of hope. Her therapist explained that her anger and erratic behavior were symptoms of the condition, and that with treatment she could improve. Desperate to keep his family intact, he threw himself into supporting her recovery, attending therapy sessions with her and listening patiently. As the months went by, she seemed to be making progress. She was allowed supervised visits with the children, and he cautiously hoped that they could rebuild their family. But just as things seemed to be on the mend, Angela suddenly began skipping counseling sessions. She grew distant once again, avoiding his calls and ignoring messages. At first, he assumed she was struggling and needed space, but her behavior became increasingly erratic. After weeks of silence, he decided to visit her at her parents' home. When he arrived, he was shocked to see her in the backyard, embracing and kissing another man, a face he vaguely recognized from old photos as Sean, Angela's childhood friend. Devastated and humiliated, he walked away, blocking her on all communication platforms and informing his parents of what he had witnessed. In their subsequent divorce, Angela chose to relinquish her parental rights to be with Sean, a decision that broke his heart for his daughter's sake. Angela's abandonment was a profound betrayal, but he focused on creating a stable, loving home for his children. His parents moved in temporarily to help with the girls, providing a semblance of normalcy as he balanced work and single parenthood. Years passed, and although life was challenging, he found a new rhythm. His daughters grew up surrounded by love and stability, and he managed to build a strong, independent family without Angela. His parents, whom he believed to be unwavering in their loyalty, became his closest allies, offering him support during the toughest moments. Gradually, his wounds began to heal, and his daughters flourished under his care. He started to believe that Angela was part of his past, a chapter he had finally closed. But one morning, 5 years after the divorce, Angela reappeared at his doorstep. She had aged visibly, her once bright demeanor now replaced by weariness. Beside her stood a small boy, around 3 years old, who clung to her leg, eyeing him shyly. Angela began to cry, asking for forgiveness, saying she had made a terrible mistake and wanted to reunite with him and their daughters. She explained that her relationship with Sean had crumbled and that she was ready to be a mother again. She begged him to let her back into their lives, saying it was her one chance to make things right. Shocked, he felt a surge of anger and betrayal. He reminded Angela of the years she had abandoned their family, of the birthdays, school events, and holidays she had missed. He told her that their daughters had grown up without her, and that he had worked tirelessly to build a stable, loving environment for them. Her sudden return felt invasive and selfish, as if she expected forgiveness simply because she was ready to be part of the family again. He refused her plea, telling her that their lives had moved on and that they were better off without her. Later that day, his parents called, urging him to reconsider. To his disbelief, he discovered that they had been secretly supporting Angela, maintaining contact with her over the years and even facilitating visits with his daughters behind his back. His parents insisted that children need their mother and argued that he should give her a second chance for the sake of the family. Their betrayal hit him deeply. These were the people he had leaned on, who had helped him raise his daughters, and they had been secretly working against his wishes, supporting the woman who had shattered their lives. Confronting his parents was painful. He felt a mix of anger, sadness, and disbelief. They tried to justify their actions, saying they had done it for the girl's well-being, insisting that a mother's presence was essential. But he saw their actions as a betrayal of trust, a disregard for the sacrifices he had made to keep his family together. They had put their perception of what a family should look like above his own hard-earned peace and stability. For years, he had put his faith in them, believing they shared his values, only to find they had undermined him in the most personal way possible. He told his parents that he could no longer trust them with his daughters and limited their contact, choosing to set clear boundaries to protect his family's stability. Although this decision hurt, he realized it was necessary to maintain the healthy environment he had worked so hard to create. His parents were heartbroken, accusing him of tearing the family apart, but he held firm, prioritizing his children's emotional safety above all else. In the weeks that followed, he wrestled with complex emotions: anger, guilt, sadness, and a sense of loss. He questioned himself, wondering if he had done the right thing, if he was being too harsh. But when he looked at his daughters, who had grown up happy, confident, and secure, he knew that his decision was rooted in love. He realized that family was not defined by blood alone, but by loyalty, respect, and trust, qualities that Angela and even his own parents had failed to uphold. Through therapy and introspection, he found a sense of closure. He forgave his parents not because they deserved it but because he wanted peace. However, he maintained his boundaries, refusing to let them interfere in his family's life. His focus remained on his daughters, on providing them with a life free from the instability and betrayal that had marked his past. He found solace in watching them grow, in seeing them thrive in the stability he had fought to create. Angela's return, though painful, became a turning point. It reminded him of his strength, of the resilience he had developed over the years. He had survived heartbreak, betrayal, and the loneliness of single parenthood, and he had come out the other side stronger, more grounded, and determined to protect his family. The experience taught him that sometimes, protecting your peace means letting go, even of those you once trusted most. In the end, he learned to define family on his own terms, surrounding himself with people who shared his values and who respected the life he had built. His daughters remained his greatest joy, a testament to his resilience and dedication. And as he watched them grow, he found peace in knowing that he had done everything in his power to give them a life filled with love, stability, and security. Update: I will now file for divorce. Backstory: me 41M and my wife 40F have been together from high school. We married 17 years ago and have 2 daughters. 1 year after we married, I found out in the most brutal way my wife had a one-night stand. Here's the story: my wife had a week off work while I was working. I had bought her some new underwear and finished a couple of hours early on a Wednesday to go home with some flowers and surprise her. I rang on the way to say I had finished early, but she didn't answer. She was just getting home when I pulled up and she looked surprised to see me. We went in the house together, I gave her the flowers and the new lingerie. She seemed super excited and tried them on straight away. Obviously this led to me going down on her, etc. etc. That night while she was walking our dog she had left her phone on the side, which was totally normal. However, a text popped up from a guy we both knew. I never really liked him, but my wife told me she had liked him before we got together. Curiosity got the better and I read the message. Basically him thanking her for earlier and how much fun he'd had. My heart sank instantly and rather than composing myself I got angry. Just then my wife got back and I confronted her about the text. She broke down and confessed that the reason she didn't answer when I rang was because she was with him. This loser still lived in his parents' loft and she went there to see him. I wish I didn't, but I got her to tell me all the details, from sucking his C*ck to him F***ing her doggy on his couch. Then the realization hit me, she had literally left his house and come home, he lived 10 minutes away. She then let me go down on her within 30 minutes of him F***ing her doggy even though she promised he wore a condom. It took months to work my head out, but I eventually decided to work through and not divorce. Then last week I bumped into this asshole in the grocery store. He still lives very close to us. He had the balls to come up to me and ask to talk, and wanted to apologize for what had happened all those years earlier. I accepted and told him it was a long time ago, but then he made a remark that stuck with me. My wife told me it had been a one-time thing and a huge mistake, but he said to me that their affair shouldn't have happened. When I questioned him he said it had been going on for several months before she broke it off and thought I knew. Help, what do I do now? Update number 1. The marriage has mainly been good over the years, but looking back I can see I have been blinded by love and just plain stupid. About 6-7 years ago my wife went through a stage of dressing up in some very kinky underwear, we are talking crotchless outfits etc. She would always want me to take pics of her in various positions. Now at the time I thought this was amazing. However, I did eventually find out she had been sending the pics to another different guy trying to seduce him. Using me to take the pics. How stupid was I? I had a meeting with the lawyer on Monday to understand my options and then I will confront her. I just don't want to destroy my kids' lives for what she has done. Update number 2. Well, firstly thank you to all the comments and advice, it really helped and was appreciated. After my meeting with the lawyer, it's not going to be an easy divorce, but I have decided this is where I am going. I did confront my wife last night and asked her to explain to me exactly what happened and for how long. She was confused that I was bringing it up again but told me the same story, it was a one-time thing. When I told her I had seen him and he had told me the truth, I could literally see the color drain from her face. She broke down and stuck to her story. From this I told her I was going to invite him over so we can find out the full truth. That's when she eventually confessed to the affair. It broke me if I am honest. I asked her again if there had ever been anyone else. She denied, but I honestly do not know. I left the family home there and then I will talk to my kids later tonight so we can get through this the best we can. Extend this story. Update number 3. After leaving the house that night, I drove around for hours trying to process everything. Memories flooded my mind, from the good times, the laughter, and the family moments that meant the world to me, to every moment that now felt like a lie. I wondered how I could ever trust her again, how she could betray me repeatedly and let me believe our marriage was solid. The thought of explaining everything to my daughters made me feel even worse. The next day I reached out to a close friend. He's known me since high school, knew both of us as a couple, and was one of the few people I trusted completely. He'd been my sounding board years ago when I first discovered the one-night stand, and he'd supported my decision to stay and try to make it work. This time, when I told him about the years-long affair and the photos she had taken with me only to send to another man, he was furious on my behalf. He couldn't believe the extent of her deceit and admitted he felt somewhat guilty for not encouraging me to leave the first time around. Talking it over with him helped. It made me realize that I was not alone in this and that I deserved better, even though my heart was still torn. I still loved her, or at least I loved the version of her I thought I knew. But now it was clear that staying together would only lead to more pain and distrust. I spent the following day meeting with my lawyer again to solidify my next steps. We discussed custody of the kids, finances, and splitting our assets. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I wanted to make the process as painless as possible for the sake of my daughters. They were innocent in all this, and the last thing I wanted was for them to feel like they were losing their family. They deserved stability and love, even if it meant a big change in our lives. That evening I called my daughters to talk to them. I didn't go into details, but I explained that their mother and I had decided it was best to live separately. I reassured them over and over that both of us loved them deeply and that they weren't to blame in any way. They were hurt and confused, of course, but they needed to hear that none of this was their fault. My youngest daughter, especially, had tears in her eyes and asked if there was anything we could do to stay together. That question broke my heart. In the weeks that followed, I moved out and stayed with my friend until I could find a new place. Every interaction with my wife was strained and painful. She tried apologizing, telling me how much she regretted what she'd done, but at this point, I had no interest in hearing it. I wasn't angry anymore, just numb. Every time I looked at her, all I could see were the lies and betrayal. As I settled into my new home, I began to focus on healing and finding a path forward. I started therapy, both individual and family counseling with my daughters, to ensure they had the support they needed. Over time, I also leaned into new activities and hobbies, trying to rediscover parts of myself that had been neglected over the years. There were difficult days. Some were filled with grief, others with anger, but there were also moments of peace and even hope. Months down the line, I can honestly say I'm in a better place. The pain of betrayal doesn't vanish overnight, but I've learned to cope and grow stronger from it. My relationship with my daughters has deepened, and I've learned to be more open and honest with them, something I wish I had done sooner. As for my wife, she continues to reach out occasionally, apologizing and hoping to rekindle some form of relationship. But I've come to understand that trust, once broken so deeply, can rarely be mended. The life we had is over, and while I may never fully understand why she did what she did, I've accepted that it's in the past. My future, for the first time in a long while, feels like it's finally in my hands. Update number 4. Months passed and life took on a new rhythm. I threw myself into my work and spent as much time with my daughters as possible. We established new routines: weekend hikes, game nights, and cooking together. I was determined to show them that, despite everything, they still had a father who was there for them. They needed consistency and support, and I wanted them to feel loved and safe. The therapy sessions were a lifeline, helping us work through the waves of emotions that hit us all. My oldest daughter eventually opened up about her fears of losing both parents and of feeling like she had to pick a side. It was gut-wrenching to see how deeply affected she was, but being able to talk openly with her helped us both. I reassured her that she would never have to choose between her parents, no matter what happened. I promised her that my love for her and her sister would never waver, and that, together, we would get through this. As time went on, I began to feel a bit more like myself again. I joined a local gym, started reading books I'd put off for years, and even took up photography, something I'd always been interested in but never had the time for. The photos became a way for me to see the world through a fresh perspective, to appreciate the beauty in the little things again. During one of my sessions, my therapist helped me work through the guilt I'd been carrying, the sense that I had been stupid or blind. He helped me see that trusting someone you love isn't a weakness, it's a strength. Being betrayed wasn't my fault, and my loyalty and commitment weren't mistakes. This realization was freeing, and I started to let go of the self-blame. As for my ex-wife, our interactions were now limited to co-parenting matters. We kept conversations civil for the kids' sake, but there was no warmth left between us. She still sent messages every now and then, usually late at night, apologizing again or expressing regret, but I'd stopped responding. There was nothing left to say. I needed to focus on moving forward, and reopening those wounds wouldn't help anyone. Around this time, I met someone new. It was unexpected and, honestly, a bit scary. I wasn't looking for a relationship, but we connected over shared interests and just enjoyed each other's company without pressure or expectations. She was understanding of my situation and patient as I navigated my own baggage. We took things slow, which felt right. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could open up and be myself again, without fear or distrust weighing me down. My daughters noticed the change in me. My youngest even commented one day, "Dad, you seem happier." Hearing that meant the world to me. I realized that rebuilding my own happiness wasn't just about my well-being, it was essential for my daughters too. They needed to see that healing was possible, that life could still be fulfilling and joyful, even after such a painful chapter. Update number 5. It's been over a year now since the initial discovery of the full extent of my wife's betrayal. Looking back, I'm grateful for the journey I've gone through, as difficult as it's been. The pain isn't entirely gone, and some memories still sting, but I'm no longer consumed by anger or sadness. I've learned to accept what happened and, more importantly, to forgive myself. My daughters and I have grown closer than ever, and our new routines feel like second nature now. They are resilient, and I'm so proud of how they've handled everything. They've adapted to the new normal, and as difficult as it's been, I think they've grown stronger too. Recently, I even had a conversation with my ex-wife. She asked if we could meet in person to talk. I hesitated but agreed, thinking maybe it was time to clear the air once and for all. When we met, she apologized again, and this time her apology felt different, more genuine, maybe because I was in a place to finally hear it. She admitted that she had been selfish, insecure, and had made terrible mistakes. She said she deeply regretted the hurt she caused not only to me but also to our daughters. As she spoke, I felt a sense of closure. I didn't need her apology to move on, but hearing it allowed me to let go of the last bits of resentment I'd been holding on to. I told her I forgave her, not for her sake but for mine. Carrying that anger was only weighing me down, and it was time to move forward fully. Now, I'm embracing life with a renewed sense of purpose. My relationship with my new partner is growing, and while I'm still cautious, I'm hopeful. I'm not rushing anything, just enjoying each day as it comes. Most importantly, I've learned that healing and happiness don't depend on anyone else. They come from within. If there's one thing I've taken from all this, it's that life doesn't always go as planned. People change, mistakes are made, and sometimes things fall apart. But through it all, I've discovered that resilience, love, and honesty, with myself and my daughters, are the foundation for rebuilding. I'm grateful for this new chapter and excited to see what the future holds for us. Update number 6. With each passing day, life felt a little lighter. My daughters settled into the new routine, and I noticed how much they were blossoming. They had grown more comfortable in our new home and seemed at peace. I knew that giving them stability and a loving environment had been the right choice, even though our family's shape had changed. As I became more open to new experiences, I found myself reconnecting with old friends and making new ones. Friends I hadn't spoken to in years reached out, and I accepted their invitations without hesitation. It felt good to have a social life outside of being a dad. My daughters noticed the changes in me too. They'd ask about my friends and even teased me when I'd go out. I could tell they were happy to see me happy. A few months later, my oldest daughter approached me one evening with a question I had half expected but wasn't fully prepared for. "Dad, would it be okay if I spent some time with Mom this weekend?" It took me a moment to respond. Although I had no lingering anger toward my ex-wife, I hadn't considered that my daughters might want to strengthen their relationship with her. I reminded myself that, regardless of what had happened between us, she was still their mother, and they deserved a relationship with her. So, I simply smiled and said, "Of course, sweetheart. You can see her whenever you like." That weekend, when they left to spend time with her, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. Part of me was glad they could have these moments with her, but I couldn't deny that I missed them while they were gone. The house was quiet, and I realized how much I'd come to depend on their presence. They'd become not only my daughters but my companions in this new life. During this time, I spent more time with my new partner, who had been incredibly supportive throughout everything. She had given me space when I needed it and had never pushed me to rush our relationship. She even offered insights on parenting that I hadn't considered. Her gentle presence was becoming a comforting part of my life, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was opening up to the idea of a real partnership again. Update number 7. One evening, during a quiet dinner, my oldest daughter surprised me with something that made me realize how resilient and wise she had become. "Dad," she began, "do you think you'll ever forgive Mom completely?" Her question was unexpected and, in a way, profound. It made me realize that she was wrestling with her own feelings about everything that had happened, and she was looking to me for guidance on how to feel. I took a deep breath and thought carefully about my answer. Forgiveness isn't always easy, and it doesn't mean forgetting what happened. But forgiving her helps me move forward, and it means I'm not carrying anger around anymore. It's a way of choosing peace over pain. She nodded slowly, taking in my words. "I think I understand. I love both of you and I don't want to feel like I have to choose." Hearing her say that touched me deeply, and I reached over, putting my hand on hers. "You never have to choose, sweetheart. Your mom and I both love you and nothing will ever change that." As the months went on, our lives continued to stabilize. My ex-wife and I had finally reached a place of mutual respect, focusing solely on co-parenting and keeping our interactions positive for our daughters. We even managed to attend a few of their school events together, setting aside any discomfort for their sake. Although it was still somewhat awkward, I could see how much it meant to them and that made it worth it. Update number 8. Nearly 2 years had passed since the initial decision to end my marriage. I was in a good place both emotionally and mentally. My daughters were thriving and my relationship with my new partner had blossomed naturally, turning into something meaningful and supportive. Life was full again and I was grateful for every small step forward. One weekend, my new partner and I took a trip to the mountains, just the two of us. It was a chance to reconnect and enjoy each other's company without any distractions. While we were there, I shared parts of my story I hadn't shared with anyone else, even my closest friends. I told her about the guilt, the heartbreak, and the long journey it had taken to reach this point. She listened patiently, her hand in mine, and when I finished, she simply smiled and said, "I'm proud of you. It takes a lot of strength to come out of something like that and still believe in love." Her words struck a chord and I realized she was right. In the beginning, I had doubted whether I'd ever find happiness or trust again. I'd wondered if I would ever let myself be vulnerable with someone new. But here I was, ready to embrace life fully, scars and all. I realized that the pain and betrayal hadn't broken me, they had transformed me. That night, I felt a profound sense of peace. The pain of the past didn't haunt me anymore, and I had truly found the strength to move forward, no longer defined by what had happened but by the life I was building. As I returned home to my daughters, I found myself appreciating the small things even more. Every moment with them felt like a gift, and I knew that my decision to leave the marriage, as difficult as it was, had ultimately been the right choice. It allowed all of us to heal, grow, and find our way to a happier, healthier future. Looking back, I realized that life is about resilience and hope. We don't always get to choose what happens to us, but we can choose how we respond. And as I looked at my daughters, I knew that we were all stronger for having weathered the storm together. Final update. As life continued, I found myself embracing every part of my journey, the highs, the lows, and everything in between. The pain I had once felt seemed distant now, like a scar that had faded over time. My daughters had grown into remarkable young women, and watching them thrive became one of my greatest joys. They were doing well in school, had friends, and seemed genuinely happy. Our bond was stronger than ever, built on openness, trust, and an unwavering commitment to each other. My relationship with my new partner had also deepened. We supported each other in ways I'd never thought possible, and she was there for my daughters too, without ever trying to replace their mother. She understood her role as a supportive figure, and they appreciated her kindness and patience. Slowly, she became a part of our family, not by force but naturally and gradually. My daughters began inviting her to join us on outings, and seeing them laugh and interact with her filled me with gratitude. My ex-wife and I found a way to coexist peacefully. Although there was no friendship between us, there was a mutual understanding and respect for our roles as parents. We attended school events, celebrated milestones, and supported our daughters' dreams together. We would always share a connection through our children, and I realized that we could still be effective co-parents without any lingering resentment. By separating our past from our parenting, we gave our daughters the chance to feel secure and loved by both of us. One day, my oldest daughter approached me with something that touched my heart deeply. She told me she was proud of how I had handled everything, that she had seen me struggle but also watched me rise above it. She hugged me tightly and said, "You showed me what strength really looks like, Dad. I'm so lucky to have you." Hearing those words brought a lump to my throat. I realized that, despite all the hardship, I had shown her a lesson about resilience and love. Several years passed and life continued to move forward. My daughters eventually went off to college, and I felt an immense sense of pride in seeing them step into the world with confidence. They were smart, kind, and resilient, everything I'd hoped they would be. Saying goodbye when they left was bittersweet, but I knew I had given them the foundation they needed to thrive. As for me, I continued to build a fulfilling life. My partner and I shared new experiences, traveled, and even started a small business together. It was a peaceful, happy life, one filled with love and mutual respect. My journey had come full circle, and the happiness I felt was rooted in everything I had learned along the way. Looking back, I was grateful for every part of my story. The pain had taught me patience and empathy, the betrayal had taught me strength, and the healing had brought me peace. Most importantly, it had brought me closer to my daughters, who had been the light that guided me through the darkest times. In the end, I discovered that while life may break us in unexpected ways, it also gives us the strength to rebuild. We have the power to create a new path, one where happiness and peace are possible despite the scars we carry. I no longer saw myself as a victim of betrayal. I was a man who had found resilience, joy, and love again. This chapter of my life had been challenging, but I emerged from it stronger and wiser. I was ready for whatever the future held, knowing that I had the support of my daughters, my partner, and, most importantly, myself. I escaped a remote corner of Cambodia by diving for money. This was a long time ago, before communications were ubiquitous. You could actually be cut off from the world, and it was great. It was January 1997 and I was back in Phnom Penh after seeing some of the sights in Cambodia. I wanted to go somewhere as remote as I possibly could. Ratnakiri province in the northeast fit the bill. It was about 350 kilometers away. You could fly in very easily, but that would be too easy. I had to do it the hard way by land to get a sense of just how remote it was. Easy does not an adventure make. By land it was a 3-day trip. There was no real road, just a track that required a 4-wheel drive vehicle to go. I travel for the trip, not the destination. A 3-day road trip was bound to be an adventure. Road trips are always good. But this would not be the kind of road trip that I was used to. They usually involved roads. My mistake was not thinking about obtaining more cash first. You use so little traveling in this region that you tend to forget about it. I was used to getting cash wherever I needed it. However, just being in Cambodia at this time was remote enough. It took an hour to obtain cash in the capital city, Phnom Penh. This involved going to a Thai bank that ran the transaction through their Bangkok HQ, and finally producing some real cash for me. For the first leg of the trip, you could go by jeep or boat. I had heard stories of the boat scraping the rocks on the river bottom. As the dry season progressed, however, at this time we were only a few months into the dry season. So, naturally, I braved the boat up the Mekong River for the first leg, stopping at Karachi for the night. This town took all of 5 minutes to walk around, nothing interesting here except for just being here. I got a room, then went looking for food. It already felt remote. In the morning I bought some travel food and then boarded a jeep for the next leg, up to Stung Treng. Thankfully, I am slim because we were seated 5 across in the front seat with more in the back. Each leg cost $10. Very quickly any sign of civilization disappeared and we were now driving on a bumpy, dried mud track surrounded by flat plains, broken only random stands of trees. The landscape was baked dry by the searing tropical sun. Fortunately, the cold, dry air of Siberia manages to force itself far down south, across the plains and mountains of Asia, and make for rather pleasant weather in what passes for winter in Cambodia. It was rather reminiscent of June in central Canada, a strong sun, but a hint of cool to the air. The light north winds were like air conditioning, fighting the scorching sun for supremacy. The dry winter air both accentuated the cooling effect, but also let the full force of sun glare down on the landscape. Looking out across the grassland, it seemed as if it would be a smoother ride if the driver just left the baked mud path and drove through the low grass. This would have the added benefit of avoiding the checkpoints. Part of this trip included the driver paying off military checkpoints, guys holding machine guns. There were just few guys standing there in the middle of nowhere. Not a single sign of civilization in sight, except for the tiny wooden guard hut. For the whole trip there was no sign of anyone else. Not one other vehicle was encountered, except for the one that would take me on the third leg of the trip. After 7 hours, as the sun gets low and the forest gets thicker, I see a jeep ahead, with a guy lying lifelessly across the hood. We are just short of Stung Treng to the north and there is a path through a break in the dense forest to the east. Our driver comes to a stop next to the other jeep and says something that I don't understand. Then the guy on the other jeep comes to life and starts yelling Ratnakiri, Ratnakiri. I understand this and manage to get the idea that he is driving his jeep to the town I'm going to right now. It's past 4 p.m. now. Possibly stupid me thinks, hey, I can get there one day early, forgetting that I'd missed seeing the town of Stung Treng and the arrival time. Only as I write this did I realize that I missed having dinner as well. So I get in the jeep and go. It soon gets dark, very dark. We are now in dense, virgin tropical forest on a muddy track. This is really rough and slow going. Up and down over wet, uneven ground and through mud puddles that would swallow up an ordinary car. In the middle of the forest some light appears. There are a bunch of dried leaf-covered huts scattered randomly around. One of them has an open side and holds a big screen TV attached to a generator. The entire village is sitting on the ground in a semicircular rows watching the giant TV. A truly bizarre sight to see. This is not what you see in National Geographic. Hours more in the pitch-black jungle and finally it opens up and then a tiny town appears. It's midnight and the town is completely closed up, another detail I conveniently forgot. I had visions of sleeping on a bench until morning. However, in true Asia fashion there is somebody selling food at the main corner, definitely needed. Clearly the seller knows the jeep's schedule. Next, the friendly jeep driver offers to drive me to a guest house. Anyone would do at this hour, but we try my selected one. The Mountain 2GH has a big panel steel gate, way out front of the house. The driver takes the initiative and bangs loudly on the steel panel. Nothing happens for a while and I feel the bench calling me. However, the driver is much less polite than me, and has no compunction about disturbing people. He keeps banging. Eventually, someone comes out and I get a nice big bed in a huge stately old colonial French-style house, that has lots of open space inside. The guest rooms hug the outside walls, leaving a large empty interior that is open through the 2 floors. Morning comes and I go explore the town. It's a really small town, no real shops and definitely no banks. There are only a few places to eat and I start to meet people. Later that day, I run into the British girls again. I knew them from Phnom Penh. I would have met them in Stung Treng if I hadn't skipped it. They had left Phnom Penh the day before me. Cambodia then at least had a strong presence of international aid agencies. It was divided into 3 regions, the American, Canadian and Japanese regions. We were in the Canadian one, run by Tsida, conveniently headed by an American guy. Tsida had just completed a really nice dock in the crater lake that was just outside of town. The British girls and I had got in the habit of making a daily trip out to the lake for a swim, using said dock, conveniently provided to us by Tsida. I didn't see this project benefiting the natives much, but it sure benefited us. We would get motorcycle taxi rides out, have a swim and walk back to town to eat. The Tsida head guy apparently had a very expensive pair of sunglasses that he had lost in the lake. He dove into the lake, off his new dock, forgetting to take them off. I believe that he was quite upset about this. He had issued a reward of $25 for anyone who could find them. This would be quite the sum of money to anyone living in the area. For context, someone living in a city in nearby Vietnam would make $30 a month working 6 or 7 days a week. Vietnam was quite a bit more advanced than Cambodia. He figured that such a princely sum would motivate someone in the town, or surrounding countryside, to find the sunglasses for him. However, it seemed that no one was able to claim the reward. For me, several days in, I realized that my cash level was falling below what I would need to take the plane back. I didn't need the adventure of the land trip again. The plane back to Phnom Penh was $50. Yes, the plane was $20 more than going by land. If you add in overnight stays and food, land travel was no cheaper than the plane. So I was stuck. Now, I literally grew up around water and swimming was second nature to me. I enjoyed free diving and was also a scuba diver. So I figured that I would help the guy find his sunglasses. An extra $25 would also be quite useful. So, I went to the Tsida office and told them of my intent to find the sunglasses, and asked if anyone happened to have a diving mask or swim goggles. Surprisingly, someone did have a diving mask which they lent to me. Now that I was set, I was wondering how many dives it would take to find the sunglasses. How many hours would I spend searching? I'm not someone who gives up easily. Since I love diving, this was going to be fun. I figured that they would be hard to find since no one else had been able to find them. Were they very deep or had they slipped under some rocks or debris? I was mostly wondering if the threshold between fun and work would be crossed. Doing what you want to do is fun, doing what you have to do is work. Sometimes the same task morphs from the former to the latter, as you have to finish what you started. The next day I set out with the British girls for our daily swim. Now the moment of truth has come. Will I find the sunglasses and claim the much talked about reward? The pressure was on. After getting wet and used to the pleasantly cool water, I donned the mask and started my dives. Each dive is just over a minute as long as I can hold my breath. Lucky and uncharacteristic for tropical fresh waters, the water in this crater lake is crystal clear. One dive and nothing. How many more dives, I wonder? It takes longer to recover your breath than the dive itself. Second dive. Dive down, equalize the pressure, then swim along the bottom as it slopes down. Immediately I see it, something glinting in that purplish rainbow way that expensive sunglasses do. There they are, as plain as day. I had found them. This was too easy. They weren't even that deep, only about 12 or 14 feet down. This wasn't hard at all. Oddly enough, I was a bit disappointed at how easy it was. I love the water and now I didn't need to keep diving. Later that day, I returned to the Tsida office and triumphantly returned the famous sunglasses to their owner, and collected my $25. Now I had enough money for the plane back to Phnom Penh. With the $25 reward tucked securely in my pocket, I finally felt a wave of relief wash over me. My time in Ratanakiri had been unforgettable, but after days of trekking through the jungle, driving on makeshift dirt paths, and diving in the crater lake, I was ready to return to the relative comforts of Phnom Penh. The plane back would be a luxury compared to the bone-jarring, arduous journey I'd taken to get there by land. That night, I celebrated my small triumph with the British girls and a few other travelers who'd trickled into the town. We sat outside, under a blanket of stars, and shared stories from our travels. In a place so remote, even the simplest things felt special. Cold drinks, conversation, and laughter. Ratanakiri was a place that drew a rare kind of traveler. Those who craved adventure and didn't mind leaving the usual comforts behind. As we shared tales of our past journeys, I realized that everyone here had a story to tell, whether it was about evading military checkpoints, navigating unpredictable river currents, or encountering strange villages in the dense jungle. The next morning, with my flight back secured, I took one last trip to the crater lake. I hadn't fully appreciated its beauty until now. The water was so clear that you could see the fish darting around below, and the tranquility of the surroundings made it feel like a place frozen in time. Unlike the hurried, fleeting visits I was used to, my time here had allowed me to sink into the slow rhythm of life in Ratanakiri. I knew I'd never experience a place quite like it again. As I walked back into town, I encountered the Tsida head who'd offered the reward. He was still buzzing with disbelief that his sunglasses had been found. I honestly thought I'd never see them again, he said, shaking his head with a chuckle. You're quite the diver. We shared a few words and I thanked him again for the reward. The cash meant a great deal to me, but it also felt like a small way to say goodbye to this unique chapter of my journey. The flight out of Ratanakiri was a short, thrilling experience on a small propeller plane that looked like it had seen a few decades of service. The tiny aircraft hummed to life, and before I knew it, we were soaring above the jungle, the lush green canopy stretching out below. The landscape opened up, revealing the Mekong River winding through fields and small villages. From above, the vastness of the jungle was even more impressive, and I felt a pang of sadness at leaving behind the dense forests, the crater lake, and the little town that had become a part of my adventure. Back in Phnom Penh, the city felt louder, brighter, and faster than I remembered. After the quiet of Ratanakiri, Phnom Penh's bustling streets and crowded markets were a shock to the senses. I could hear the hum of motorcycles, the chatter of vendors, and the laughter of children as I made my way through the city. But I had a newfound appreciation for the chaos and the energy. It was a reminder of how different each part of the country was. The adventure I'd sought in Ratanakiri had been more than just a trip. It had been a test of resilience, patience, and resourcefulness. I hadn't planned on running out of cash, hitching a ride in the middle of nowhere, or diving for sunglasses to pay for my flight home. But that's the beauty of travel. The best stories often come from the moments you least expect. Sitting in a small cafe that evening, I scribbled notes in my travel journal, capturing every detail of the journey, from the military checkpoints to the midnight food vendor to the crater lake. I wanted to remember everything, the sounds, the sights, and the sense of freedom I'd felt. It wasn't about the destination or even the final goal, it was about everything that happened in between, every twist and turn that had brought me here. In the years that followed, I would look back on this trip to Ratanakiri as one of the defining adventures of my life. It was a reminder that sometimes, the greatest experiences come not from comfort and ease, but from diving headfirst into the unknown, with nothing but your wits, resilience, and a little bit of luck. And every time I saw a pair of sunglasses glinting in the sun, I'd smile, remembering that dive, that lake, and that remote corner of Cambodia that had, for a brief moment, felt like the center of my world. Months after returning home, I would find myself recounting the story to friends over coffee or during quiet moments, each time remembering details I thought I'd forgotten. I'd tell them about the night spent bouncing around in a jeep through the Cambodian jungle, the makeshift military checkpoints, and the bizarre sight of villagers in the middle of nowhere, gathered around a glowing TV screen powered by a generator. It all felt like a fever dream, a collage of surreal scenes stitched together by chance and circumstance. But there were parts of the story I kept for myself. Like the calm I felt as I drifted through the crater lake, water surrounding me quiet and clear. Or the eerie beauty of the empty plains stretching out under the sun, desolate and otherworldly. Those moments had changed me in small, imperceptible ways. They had reminded me of something that was easy to forget in the rush of life back home, that the world was vast, mysterious, and full of surprises. Back in the city, I'd sometimes find myself daydreaming about that old colonial guesthouse in Ratanakiri, with its steel gate and vast empty halls. I could still feel the smooth, worn wood of the floor beneath my feet and hear the gentle rustling of the trees outside my window as I drifted off to sleep. And I'd picture that tiny market square where I'd eaten a late-night meal with the Jeep driver and the quiet camaraderie that came from being two strangers, linked only by a shared destination in a far-off place. Over time, that trip became more than just a memory. It was a reminder that life doesn't always need a carefully laid plan. Some of the best experiences happen when you're thrown out of your comfort zone, with no map, no cash, and only your instincts to rely on. In Ratanakiri, I had been forced to trust strangers, dive for my survival money, and find my way through a land that had no intention of being easy or accommodating. And in doing so, I'd experienced something rare, a raw, unfiltered sense of adventure that was impossible to recreate. As the years went by, I stayed in touch with a few of the friends I'd met on that trip. The British girls went on to travel through Southeast Asia, making their own stories along the way. Every so often we'd trade messages, laughing about that journey, wondering if Ratanakiri had changed, or if the Tsita head still swam in the crater lake. Sometimes, when I tell the story, people would ask if I'd ever want to go back to Ratanakiri, to see it again and revisit those places. But in truth, I never did. The Ratanakiri of my memory, with its quiet town, untouched forest, and quirky moments, was perfect as it was. I didn't need to see it transformed by time or tourism. I like to think of it as a place forever frozen in that one perfect moment. Dusty roads stretching out into the horizon, the smell of distant fires in the air, and a life lived at a slower, simpler pace. Now, every time I board a plane or set off on a new adventure, a part of me carries that trip with me. Ratanakiri taught me to embrace the unexpected, to dive into situations without a plan, and to find joy in the little things. A warm meal at midnight, a stranger's kindness, a dive into a lake with nothing but hope for good fortune. And whenever I feel life speeding up, pulling me back into routine, I close my eyes and think of that quiet town, the crater lake, and the thrill of being truly, completely untethered from the world.